Welcome to Billionaire Heart Stories, where we peel back the designer suits and expose the souls underneath. You're about to enter a world where nothing is as it seems, where the quiet server pouring your wine might be planning your empire's downfall, where the CEO in the corner office hides paintings of his loneliness, where families built on billion-dollar lies finally face the truth they've been running from. These aren't fairy tales. They're war stories dressed in Armani, revenge plots served on silver platters, love affairs that could destroy dynasties or save them. We tell stories about people who've lost everything discovering what truly matters, about the invisible becoming unforgettable, about hearts hardened by wealth learning to feel again. Because in the end, the most valuable thing a billionaire can own isn't another company. It's their humanity. Let the story begin. Through the two-way mirror of Private Dining Room 3, Elena Costa had perfected the art of disappearing. Not literally, her body still occupied space, still carried plates of $40 appetizers, and poured wine that cost more than her monthly rent, but in the way that mattered to Manhattan's financial elite. She existed in that peculiar dimension reserved for service workers, present enough to be useful, absent enough to be ignored. The Sable Room thrummed with the particular frequency of old money on a Friday night. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across Carrara marble floors, their glow softening the hard edges of men who spent their days dismantling companies and reassembling them for profit. The air carried layers of expensive cologne, sandalwood and bergamot, mixing with the yeast-sharp scent of fresh bread and the mineral tang of oysters flown in from Cape Cod that morning. Somewhere in the kitchen, pans hissed against open flame. Out here, in the dining rooms, conversation hummed like a well-tuned engine. Stock tickers, merger rumors, political favors discussed with the casual ruthlessness of men who'd never known consequence. Elena moved through it all like smoke. Pouring water with her left hand, the right pressed against her ribcage where the micro-recorder sat hidden beneath her name tag. 2 years she'd walked these floors. 730 nights of invisible warfare, cataloging conversations, memorizing faces, building a case against the empire that had destroyed her family. Every smile she forced felt like swallowing glass. Every "yes, sir," and "right away, ma'am" carved another piece from her soul. But tonight felt different. The air held weight, like the moment before a thunderstorm when even the birds go quiet. At 8:47 p.m., Lorenzo Vescari walked through the door, and the entire restaurant shifted. Not obviously, these people were too practiced for obvious, but Elena felt it. Servers stood straighter. The maitre d' appeared from nowhere, all deference and Italian pleasantries. Even the ambient noise dropped half a decibel, conversations pausing mid-sentence as heads turned with the gravitational pull of proximity to power. Lorenzo commanded space the way other men commanded boardrooms. Effortlessly, absolutely. 68 years old, silver hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from Tuscan marble. All strong bones and aristocratic angles. His Brioni suit probably cost more than Elena's father had earned in his last year of life, back when Antonio Serravalle still had a life, still had a bank, still had a reason to wake up in the morning. The Vescari patriarch moved with the unhurried grace of a man who'd never waited for anything, never been told no, never questioned whether the world would bend to accommodate him. But it was the man beside him who made Elena's hands tremble against the water pitcher. Adrian Vescari, 32, CEO of Vescari Global's Americas division. Face that belonged on magazine covers but carried the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept well in years. Where his father broadcast power, Adrian contained it, a careful, controlled energy that reminded Elena of a live wire wrapped in silk. Charcoal Tom Ford suit, Patek Philippe watch catching the light, jaw that could cut glass and eyes that calculated the value of everything they saw. Elena had been studying him for 2 years. She knew he drank his espresso black, 3 shots, at 6 a.m. every morning before the markets opened. Knew he boxed at an exclusive gym in Midtown, left-handed, favoring body shots over flashy combinations. Knew he drove himself to work in a vintage Aston Martin he'd restored personally, that he had a scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood fall, that he never, ever touched alcohol in public settings. She knew things about Adrian Vescari he probably didn't know she could see, and that knowledge felt dangerous, because somewhere in the past 6 months, observation had curdled into something else. Something that made her chest tight when he walked into the restaurant. Something that whispered treacherous questions. What if he's different? What if he's not his father's son? In the ways that matter? Elena crushed that thought like stepping on embers. Adrian Vescari was the enemy. His blood carried the same name that had destroyed her family, signed the documents that sent her father over a palazzo balcony, orphaned her at 18. Loving your enemy wasn't brave, it was suicide. She approached their table, Shui pitcher steady now through sheer force of will. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Sable Room. Her voice came out perfect, neutral, pleasant, forgettable. The accent she'd spent 2 years cultivating. New Jersey adjacent, working class, No hint of the private tutors or Oxford degree that lived in her real voice. Lorenzo glanced up. His eyes were the color of old pennies, sharp, with the intelligence of a man who'd built an empire by reading people better than balance sheets. The usual table, I presume. Of course, Mr. Vescari. Right this way. Adrian didn't look at her. He rarely did. But she felt his awareness anyway, that sixth sense predators develop, always knowing who occupies their space. As she led them to private dining room 3, she cataloged his movements, the way his shoulders held tension like a man carrying weight he couldn't put down, the micro-adjustment when someone walked too close behind him, the careful distance he maintained from his father. After seating them, she poured water, ice cubes clinking against crystal, the sound absurdly civilized, and recited specials she'd memorized phonetically in Italian. Lorenzo ordered without looking at the menu, dismissing prices like loose change. Adrian requested the branzino, then added, "Just water for me. Still, no ice." Always water, never wine. Elena filed away this confirmation of her previous observations. As she turned to leave, Lorenzo's voice stopped her. "The wine list, per favore." She returned with a leather-bound catalog, and Lorenzo flipped through it with the boredom of a man who owned vineyards. His Italian flowed like expensive olive oil. Tuscan aristocracy, old-world precision. Elena responded in careful textbook Italian, giving nothing away. But Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. Just slightly, just enough. She retreated to the service corridor, pulse hammering. Behind the closed door, she pressed her forehead against cool wall tile and tried to remember how to breathe. Through the cracks, she heard their conversation. All business, merger talks, quarterly projections. Father and son communicated like chess players, each word a calculated move. When Lorenzo criticized a rival CEO's sentimental weakness, Adrian's response came too measured, too controlled. Elena recognized that tone. She used it herself when serving men who disgusted her. He hates this, she thought. He hates the performance as much as I do. The realization felt like standing on unstable ground. 20 minutes later, clearing their appetizer plates, Elena noticed it. Adrian's sketchbook, left carelessly open on the seat beside him. The drawing visible was charcoal work, technically brilliant, a Manhattan cityscape, all sharp angles and isolated windows lit against darkness. It was signed A.V. In the corner, and it was the saddest thing Elena had ever seen. Beautiful and devastating, like watching someone bleed in slow motion. Before she could look away, Adrian's hand moved lightning fast, closing the book. Their eyes met. Half a second, maybe less. His expression unreadable, but something flickered behind those calculating eyes. Embarrassment? Vulnerability? Then his face became marble again, and Elena felt like she'd witnessed something private, something he'd kill to keep hidden. She mumbled an apology and fled. In the kitchen, Marcus, the head server, 50 years old with kind eyes and a daughter fighting leukemia, caught her arm. "You okay, kid? You look pale." Elena forced a smile. "Just tired." "And the Vescaris are sharks," Marcus said, squeezing her shoulder. "But their money spends like everyone else's. Keep your head down." If only you knew, Elena thought. At 9:13 p.m., Lorenzo's phone rang. Elena was refilling water glasses when she heard him answer in rapid Calabrian dialect. Not Italian, but the regional mountain language her grandmother had taught her, the tongue of Serravalle Valley, where her ancestors had built banks and raised families for 400 years. A language so specific, so archaic, that maybe 1,000 people worldwide still spoke it. Lorenzo's words cut through her like winter wind. Il problema deve essere eliminato prima di lunedì. The problem must be eliminated before Monday. And then the name that stopped her heart, Marco Serravalle, her brother. Lorenzo Vescari was discussing killing her brother. The coffee pot in Elena's hand began to shake, water sloshing against porcelain. Lorenzo looked up, switched languages mid-sentence, and asked her a question in the same ancient Calabrian, a phrase that translated roughly to, "Little mouse, have you been listening?" It was a test, a trap, and Elena, running on pure instinct and fear for Marco's life, did the unthinkable. She answered. The words left Elena's mouth before her brain could build the wall to stop them. In perfect Serravalle mountain dialect, a tongue that should have died with her parents, that existed now only in the mouths of ghosts, she responded with an ancient proverb her father used to murmur when teaching her the family business. Anche il topo conosce la faccia del gatto. Even the mouse knows the face of the cat. The silence that followed felt like falling. That specific stomach-dropping sensation of realizing you've stepped off a cliff and gravity hasn't caught up yet. The coffee pot trembled in Elena's grip. Around the table, conversations died mid-sentence. Ice cubes stopped clinking in crystal glasses. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to withdraw, pulling back like a wave before the tsunami. Lorenzo's wineglass froze halfway to his lips. His face transformed, surprise flickering across those aristocratic features before calculations slammed down, like a steel gate. He set the glass down with careful precision, the kind of deliberate movement predators make before they strike. Serravalle dialect. His voice came out soft, dangerous. He switched to English, every syllable a scalpel. I haven't heard that tongue in 8 years. Not since the family. He paused deliberately, letting the unfinished sentence hang like a noose. Tell me, little waitress, where does a girl like you learn the language of ghosts? Elena's training evaporated. 2 years of carefully constructed cover story, of practice lies and memorized backstory, crumbled like sandcastles against high tide. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. The Elizabeth Costa from Newark, community college dropout, no family, no history before 2 years ago, shattered completely. She could feel Adrian watching her with laser focus, feel the weight of his intelligence cataloging every micro-expression, every tell her body betrayed. Her pulse hammered against her throat. The micro-recorder pressed against her ribs suddenly felt like a bomb. My grandmother, she was from, but the lie wouldn't form. Her grandmother had been from Serravalle Valley, had taught Elena the dialect over summer visits to the ancestral palazzo, back when the Serravalle name still meant something, back when her father still smiled. The service corridor seemed 1,000 miles away. Every instinct Elena possessed screamed the same word, run. Before Lorenzo could press the knife deeper, Adrian spoke. It's fine. His voice cut through the tension like he was diffusing ordnance. Calm, professional. But underneath, Elena heard something else, a subtle shift that might have been protection. You can go. Lorenzo's head swiveled toward his son, one silver eyebrow arching with patrician surprise. Adrian, this is interesting. A waitress who speaks a dead language from our enemy's homeland? Father. Adrian's tone remained measured, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You're frightening the staff. It's just a language, probably learned from old country relatives. But his eyes, when they met Elena's for one crystalline second, sent a different message entirely. The look lasted maybe half a breath, but Elena read it clear as headlines. Leave, now. Before this gets worse. Lorenzo laughed, but the sound carried no warmth. It reminded Elena of breaking glass. Interesting that you defend her, son. You never noticed the help. He turned back to Elena, switching again to Calabrian, each word deliberate. Oh, forse non è affatto un aiutante. Forse è qualcosa di molto più prezioso. Or perhaps she's not help at all. Perhaps she's something far more valuable. He reached into his jacket. Elena's entire body went rigid, adrenaline spiking, but he only produced a business card. Ivory stock, embossed lettering, the Vescari global logo like a brand. He slid it across the white tablecloth. If you're looking for better employment, miss, and he let the question hang. Costa. Elena's voice came out barely above a whisper. Elena Costa. Miss Costa. Lorenzo's smile didn't reach his eyes. Call this number. We always have positions for multilingual talent, especially those who understand historical languages. Elena grabbed the card with shaking hands, mumbled something about checking other tables, and fled. Her legs barely carried her weight. She made it past Marcus's concerned expression, past the kitchen, where line cooks shouted orders in Spanish and English, through the staff exit into the alley behind the Sable Room. November air hit her like a slap, cold and sharp, carrying the smell of garbage and exhaust from Canal Street traffic. Elena leaned against brick wall, gasping, hyperventilating. Stupid, stupid, stupid. 2 years of perfect cover, destroyed by one moment of panic over Marco. She needed to disappear, tonight. Before Lorenzo made the connection between Elena Costa and Ariana Serravalle, before he realized the ghost haunting his restaurant was the daughter of the man his empire had destroyed. Behind her, the service door opened. Footsteps, measured, deliberate. Wait, Adrian's voice. Elena froze, every muscle locking down. She was 3 steps into the alley's darkness when she heard him round the corner. He stood there still in his perfect suit, completely out of place, against grimy brick and industrial dumpsters, hands raised slightly in a gesture of peace. You don't have to be afraid. His voice was different now. No boardroom steel, just something almost gentle. I'm not gonna hurt you. Elena backed up until brick pressed against her spine. Nowhere left to retreat. Stay away from me. The words came out stronger than she felt, carrying 2 years of buried fury and fresh terror. Adrian stopped, maintaining careful distance. This close, without the barrier of service formality between them. Elena saw details she'd only cataloged from afar. Exhaustion carved into the skin around his eyes, a faint scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the way his jaw worked when his mind was calculating probabilities. He smelled like expensive cologne, something with cedar and leather, but underneath that, she caught the sharp tang of adrenaline. He was as wired as she was. Who are you? Adrian asked quietly. Not a demand, a question. Really, because Elena Costa doesn't exist. I checked after the third time you served our table. The admission hit Elena like cold water. He'd been investigating her, the same way she'd been documenting him. The symmetry would have been funny if her heart wasn't trying to jackhammer through her ribs. I'm no one, she whispered. Just a waitress trying to survive. Adrian shook his head slowly. You speak a dialect that only exists in one valley in Calabria. You recognize my father's threat pattern immediately. Your face went white when he mentioned Monday. And the way you move? He paused, choosing words carefully. You're trained. Military, intelligence. You observe everything but never ask questions. That's not a waitress. That's a black SUV pulled into the alley entrance, cutting off his words. Tinted windows, engine idling with predatory patience. The vehicle blocked their only exit like a cork in a bottle. Adrian's body language shifted instantly, from curious to dangerous. Every muscle coiled. That's not my father's car. He moved without thinking, positioning himself between Elena and the vehicle. Get behind me. The SUV doors opened in synchronized precision. 4 men emerged wearing tactical gear that tried to pass as civilian clothes. Communications earpieces, barely visible. Weapons concealed, but obvious to anyone trained to notice. The lead man had Slavic features, dead eyes that reflected light like a shark's. Mr. Vescari. His English carried a Moscow accent, flat and professional. Step away from the woman. Adrian didn't move. Who sent you? Mr. Orlov wishes to speak with the woman, alone. Elena's heart stopped. Orlov. Mikail Orlov, Lorenzo's head of security, former FSB operative, the man whose signature appeared on every forged document that destroyed her family, the man she'd spent 2 years trying to collect evidence against, the ghost in the machine, who'd murdered her father and called it suicide. He knew. Somehow, he knew who she was. Adrian's voice went cold. Call Orlov. Tell him Adrian Vescari says no. The lead mercenary's hand drifted toward his concealed weapon. Mr. Orlov was very clear. The woman comes with us. You can walk away. Adrian laughed, bitter, sharp. You're threatening me on a Manhattan street? Do you know who I... The mercenary pulled his gun. Elena's training overrode thought. She grabbed Adrian's hand, his skin warm against her ice-cold palm, the first time she'd touched him, and yanked him sideways just as silenced gunfire erupted. The brick wall where Adrian's head had been exploded in dust and fragments. Run! Elena screamed, dragging him deeper into the alley toward the fire escape she'd scouted 6 months ago for exactly this scenario. Behind them, boots pounded pavement. Above them, the sky opened up. Rain sudden and violent, November cold turning their breath to fog. They sprinted through Tribeca streets, past shocked pedestrians who scattered like pigeons. The mercenaries pursued with professional efficiency, cutting off escape routes, voices crackling through earpieces. Who are these people? Adrian gasped, keeping pace. Your father's problem? Elena panted. Now yours. And she navigated the city like someone who'd memorized every exit. Down a subway entrance, vaulting the turnstile while Adrian fumbled for his Metro card before following her lead. They crashed onto a stopped F train just as doors hissed shut. Through the window, Elena watched mercenaries hit the platform. But the lead man spoke into his radio, and the train didn't move. He's shutting down the grid, Elena realized, chest heaving. Orlov has that kind of access? Adrian's face went grim. He's been with my father for 12 years. He has access to everything. They exited through the emergency door at the next stop, plunging into service corridors that reeked of oil and decades of accumulated grime. Adrian followed without question. For the first time in his privileged life, not the most powerful person in the room. How do you know these tunnels? He demanded. Stay close, Elena said, ignoring the question. They emerged near South Street Seaport, lungs burning, soaked with rain and sweat, but black SUVs were already converging from 3 directions. Elena pulled Adrian toward the waterfront. The East River churned below, dark, freezing, deadly. We can't go in there, Adrian said. It's November. Hypothermia in minutes. Elena didn't slow down. Better than a bullet. The loft smelled like turpentine and solitude. Elena stood in Adrian Vescari's secret sanctuary, water pooling beneath her ruined shoes, and watched his face cycle through shock, confusion, and something that might have been violation. How long? His voice came out quiet, dangerous. How long have you known about this place? 18 months. Elena stripped off her soaked jacket with practical efficiency. Her waitress uniform clung to her skin, translucent and ruined. I followed you here one night after your father humiliated you at a board meeting. You came here and painted for 6 hours straight. As the loft was exactly as Adrian had left it that morning. Unfinished canvases everywhere, paint-stained drop cloths covering hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Red Hook's industrial waterfront. Rain hammered against glass. The space felt enormous and intimate simultaneously, filled with Adrian's secret self. Brushes soaking in mason jars, color-splattered easels. The ghost of every lonely night he'd spent here trying to feel human. I could call security right now, Adrian said, but didn't move toward his phone. You could. Elena found towels in his bathroom. She knew where everything was, had watched him through these windows enough times to map the space blindfolded. But Orlov would find us in minutes. Your security system reports to him. So does your phone's GPS. She tossed him a towel. We're only safe here because I disabled the alarm when I first broke in a year ago. Change, unless you want hypothermia. They moved to separate corners, the vulnerability of stripping down, creating strange intimacy even without sightlines. Elena heard Adrian's wet clothes hit the floor, heard his sharp intake of breath as cold air hit bare skin. She changed quickly, pulling on sweatpants from his locker, rolling them at the waist, drowning in a t-shirt that smelled like him, paint thinner, an expensive detergent, and something uniquely Adrian. When she emerged, he stood by the window in paint-stained jeans and a Columbia sweatshirt, his hair stuck up in dark spikes. Without the armor of his suit, he looked younger, more real, like someone who might paint sadness at 3 a.m. instead of dismantling companies. Who are you? Adrian asked again, gentler this time. Elena sat on the window seat, pulling her knees up, a gesture that made her feel breakable. My name is Ariana Serravalle. My father was Antonio Serravalle. Your father's empire destroyed mine 8 years ago. I was 18. The name hit Adrian like physical force. She watched him process it, watched the pieces slot into place behind those intelligent eyes. Serravalle, the banking family that collapsed. My father said that my father was a criminal. Ariana finished, voice bitter as burnt coffee, that he embezzled billions, committed fraud, deserved to lose everything. I know what your father said. I also know it's a lie. She told him everything. How she'd watched her father jump from their palazzo balcony, how her mother had died 6 months later from grief that felt like cancer, how Marco had been hidden in Italy while she rebuilt herself as Elena Costa. I needed evidence, not revenge, evidence, because my father was innocent, and I can prove it. She pulled the Serravalle signet ring from beneath her shirt. Platinum, family crest worn smooth by generations. This contains 8 years of proof that Mikail Orlov framed my family to hide his own embezzlement. He's been stealing from Vescari Global since before you became CEO. My father discovered it. Orlov destroyed us to cover his tracks. Adrian sank into his painting chair, head in his hands. If this is true, if my father destroyed your family based on lies, then Lorenzo Vescari isn't infallible, Ariana said softly. He's human. He made a mistake. A devastating one. Adrian looked up, and his eyes were raw in a way she'd never seen. Why tell me? Why not just disappear with your evidence? Because I've watched you for 2 years. The admission felt like standing naked. You're nothing like your father. You hate board meetings. You only drink water because you're afraid of losing control. You paint beauty when surrounded by sharks. She stopped, the words too revealing. I'm what? Adrian prompted. You're the only person in that world who might choose truth over empire. His phone buzzed. Text from Lorenzo. Adrian, Orlov says there's been a kidnapping attempt. He's mobilizing teams to find you. What should I tell him? Ariana read over his shoulder. Tell him you're safe. Don't mention me. Adrian hesitated only a second before typing. False alarm. Overreacted to suspicious car. I'm at the loft. Need space. We'll check in tomorrow. Ariana's leg was bleeding. Scraped from the tunnel. Adrenaline fading enough that pain registered. Adrian noticed. Move it to her side. You're hurt. It's nothing. Let me help. He knelt before her with a first aid kit, and Ariana's breath caught. His hands were steady, cleaning the wound, gentle applying antiseptic. This close, she saw scars on his knuckles, boxing, 5 a.m. sessions before market open. You're being kind, she whispered, to someone whose family is your enemy. Adrian applied the bandage carefully. Maybe I'm tired of inheriting other people's wars. Their eyes met. His hands still rested on her calf, warm and real. When Orlov's man aimed that gun at you, Adrian said quietly, I stepped in front without thinking. Why? I don't know, but right now it feels like we're on the same side. They talked through the night like prisoners granted temporary reprieve, knowing dawn would return them to their separate wars. Ariana told Adrian about growing up behind palazzo walls, riding horses through Calabrian mountains, while her father taught her to read financial statements at age 10. He wanted me to be the first woman to lead the family bank, she said, voice carrying ghosts. Instead, I became invisible. Adrian spoke about boarding schools where he had tutors but no friends, about learning, at 12, that his mother's car accident was being investigated. Inconclusive results, he said bitterly. Lorenzo shut down the inquiry within a week. I've always wondered if he knew something he didn't want found. The loft windows framed Manhattan's skyline, 1,000 lit windows holding 1,000 separate loneliness. Rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and glittering like broken promises. Why waitressing? Adrian asked. Why not corporate espionage, hack his files remotely? Ariana smiled, sad and small. Because I needed to see you, all of you. The board members who enable Orlov, the politicians who take your father's money. But mostly, she paused, the admission dangerous. I needed to see if you were complicit or just trapped. And your verdict? Still deciding, she said, but her eyes had gone soft. Though harboring your enemy instead of calling security is promising. As false dawn turned the sky pewter, Ariana asked to see his paintings. Adrian hesitated. No one had ever seen his work, this most private version of himself, but he stood, walked her through canvases like revealing scars. Manhattan at night, windows like lonely eyes, bridges connecting nothing to nowhere, towers reaching toward empty sky. They're beautiful, Ariana whispered. And so sad. It's how the city feels, Adrian admitted, like millions of people all alone together. Ariana stopped at one small canvas, a single lit window in a dark building painted with aching detail. Recognition hit her like electricity. That's my apartment, from February. You painted my window? Adrian's face colored. I noticed the light stayed on late. I wondered who you were. What kept you awake? The air between them shifted, heavy with things neither dared speak. Ariana's phone buzzed. Encrypted message, unknown number. They're coming for him, 10 a.m. The loft is compromised. Orlov knows. Get Adrian out. Her hands shook. Marco, her brother, who was supposed to be safely hidden in Italy, who shouldn't know about this loft, who definitely shouldn't have access to Orlov's operational intelligence. Who's M? Adrian asked, reading over her shoulder. My brother. Ariana's throat tightened. Who isn't supposed to be in contact with me? And who shouldn't know Orlov's movements? Adrian's jaw set. Then Orlov has him. He's using Marco to track you. At 6 a.m., exhaustion finally caught them. Ariana stood on shaking legs. I should make coffee. If we're going to survive today, we need fuel. She moved through Adrian's kitchen like she belonged there. She'd watched him through these windows enough to know where he kept the French press, the good beans from that roaster in Dumbo. Adrian watched her, this woman who was both stranger and intimately known, brewing coffee in his space, wearing his clothes, existing in his most private sanctuary like she'd always been there. When she handed him a mug, their fingers touched, lingered. Thank you, Adrian said quietly. For? For not killing me when you had the chance. Ariana laughed, surprised, genuine. Adrian, if I wanted you dead, you'd have died 2 years ago. Why didn't you? Because you paint sadness at 3 a.m., she said softly. And defend waitresses you don't know. And step in front of bullets for strangers. You're not your father's son, you're just you. They collapsed on his couch, coffee forgotten, bodies heavy with fatigue, and the particular exhaustion that comes from exposing your soul to another human. Adrian's head tipped back. I should stay awake. Watch for Orlov. Sleep, Ariana murmured. I'll keep watch. But within minutes, they'd both surrendered. Adrian on one end of the couch, Ariana on the other, feet nearly touching, their breathing synchronized. The sun rose over the harbor, painting the loft in shades of gold and promise. For 90 minutes, they were safe. At 7:30 a.m., Ariana woke to the sound of engines, multiple vehicles. She moved to the window, looked down at the street 3 floors below, black SUVs, tactical teams positioning at every exit, and walking toward the warehouse entrance, flanked by armed security, Lorenzo Vescari, her father's murderer, had found them. Ariana woke Adrian with a hand over his mouth. Tactical, learned from watching spy films and reading operational manuals during 2 years of self-taught espionage. His eyes snapped open instantly, body going from sleep to full alertness in a heartbeat. No grogginess, pure survival instinct. Your father's here, she whispered against his ear. 20 men, maybe more. Adrian sat up, processing. He moved to the window, assessed the situation with the same calculating precision he probably used analyzing hostile takeovers. He wouldn't send that many just to retrieve me. He knows something. Downstairs, Lorenzo's voice echoed through the empty warehouse. Adrian, I know you're here. I'm alone. Let me in. Ariana checked the window. Lorenzo had indeed separated from his security detail, standing at the warehouse door with hands visible and empty. But everything about this felt wrong, like walking into a bear trap made of good intentions. It's a trap, she said. Adrian studied his father's body language, the set of his shoulders, the way he positioned himself, the slight slump that Adrian had never seen before. No, he's scared. I've never seen him scared. And against every screaming instinct, Adrian opened the door. Lorenzo climbed 3 flights slowly, like a man carrying weight. When he entered the loft, his eyes went immediately to Ariana. Recognition flared across his aristocratic features. Instant, complete. Ariana Serravalle, not a question. A statement. You've grown up. Ariana lifted her chin, Serravalle pride in every vertebra. Lorenzo Vescari, you've grown old. It should have been an insult, but Lorenzo's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Fair. He turned to Adrian. You know who she is? Yes. And you're protecting her? Yes. Lorenzo absorbed this like taking a punch. I taught you better than that. Did you? Adrian stepped between his father and Ariana, claiming sides. Because you also taught me loyalty, honor, the value of truth. And she has truth you need to hear. And Lorenzo sat heavily on Adrian's painting stool, this titan of finance suddenly looking his full 68 years. 12 hours ago, I trusted Mikail Orlov with my life. His voice cracked on the edges. Now I have proof he's been embezzling from the company for 8 years. Proof he orchestrated the Serravalle family's destruction to cover his crimes. And proof, he stopped, drew breath like a man drowning, that he ordered the hit on your mother, Adrian, because Diana discovered his theft. The loft went silent. Even the city noise outside seemed to withdraw. Adrian's face drains of color, going pale as old paper. What? The word came out strangled. Lorenzo produced a file folder, hands shaking in a way Ariana had never imagined possible. I spent the night with my legal team, my real security team. Everything unravels. The Serravalle collapse, the forged documents, the shell companies. It was all Orlov. Ariana pulled the signet ring from her neck, opened the hidden compartment. The micro SD card gleamed like a bullet. I know. I've had the evidence for 6 months. She handed it to Lorenzo. He stared at it like it might burn his palm. Your father gave you this? The night before he died, he knew what was coming. He just couldn't prove it in time. Lorenzo's hands trembled, this man of steel, shaking. Antonio was innocent. Yes. I destroyed an innocent family. Yes. Always in you, he looked at Ariana, with something that might have been wonder or horror. You've been working at the Sable Room for 2 years. You could have killed me 100 times. Why didn't you? Because my father's last words were, don't let hate make you like them. Ariana's voice didn't waver. I wanted justice, not revenge. I wanted truth, not blood. Lorenzo stood, walked to the window. When he turned back, tears tracked down his face. The first time Adrian had seen his father cry. Ever. I'm sorry, Lorenzo said. I know that's inadequate, but I'm sorry. My parents are still dead, Ariana said coldly. Marco grew up without them. Your apology doesn't fix that. No, Lorenzo agreed, but perhaps this does. He made a call, put it on speaker. Marco, it's Lorenzo Vescari. I'm here with your sister. Marco's voice came through. Young, scared, achingly alive. Ariana? They said you were in danger. I'm okay, Ariana choked out. Where are you? Milan, Mr. Vescari's men brought me to his estate last night. She looked at Lorenzo, confused. I've been funding Marco's education for 3 years, Lorenzo said quietly. Penance. When I realized Orlov was targeting you, I extracted your brother first. Adrian's phone rang. Private number. He answered, and Orlov's voice poured through like poison. Adrian, put me on speaker. Adrian put Orlov on speaker. The voice that emerged was smooth as expensive whiskey, dangerous as black ice. Lorenzo, I believe your son is with you, and the Serravalle girl. Mikail. Lorenzo's voice went cold as January steel. You've made a miscalculation. Orlov laughed, the sound of breaking glass wrapped in silk. Have I? Those legal files you received? I know about them. I have the originals. And I have 40 board members who will testify that you've been mentally unstable. Adrian will be declared unfit by association. Within 48 hours, I'll control Vescari Global through a board coup. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. You'll never pull it off. I already have. Check the news. Adrian pulled up his tablet. Bloomberg headline screamed in all caps. Vescari Global in crisis, whistleblower alleges fraud. The story implicated both Lorenzo and Adrian, using carefully manipulated evidence that looked damning. Stock price plummeted in real time, hemorrhaging millions per second. Emergency board meeting called for 1 p.m. today. Orlov's voice purred through the speaker. See you at the tower, gentlemen. Oh, and Adrian, I know you're with the Serravalle girl. If you want her to live, come alone, leave her behind. Otherwise, I'll send teams and she'll die like her father did. Falling from a great height, the line went dead. Lorenzo slammed his fist on the drafting table hard enough to make paint jars jump. He's forcing our hand. The board meeting is his coup. He'll have us arrested on live television. No. Ariana stood, and something in her voice made both Vescari men turn. This ends today. I have evidence that clears your family and destroys Orlov. We take it to the board meeting. He'll kill you, Adrian said, and the desperation in his voice surprised everyone, including him. Maybe, Ariana acknowledged. But I've been invisible long enough. Within the hour, the loft transformed into a war room. Lorenzo's personal security team arrived. Not Vescari Global Corporate Security, but men who owed Lorenzo their lives. Ex-Delta Force, ex-CIA, people who operated in moral gray zones and asked questions later. The team leader was Sofia Reyes, 45, sharp-eyed, with the controlled violence of a drawn blade. We have 3 hours to prepare a counteroffensive, Sofia said, spreading tactical maps across Adrian's painting table. Orlov controls building security, the board's communications, and he's planted evidence across 12 jurisdictions. This isn't just a corporate coup, it's a military operation. Ariana spread her evidence beside Sofia's maps. 2 years of documentation, financial records, communication intercepts, witness statements collected from frightened mid-level employees. We can't just present data. Orlov will claim it's fabricated. We need irrefutable real-time proof. And she'd been planning this scenario for 24 months. Every contingency mapped. Orlov's embezzlement flows through 3 shell companies in Cyprus. If we trace those transactions during the board meeting, show the money moving in real time, catch him red-handed, he can't deny it. Sofia frowned. That requires access to international banking systems. Real time, that's illegal, Ariana finished. Yes, but I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you what's necessary. Adrian had been quiet, watching Ariana command the room. She wasn't a waitress now. She was a Serravalle. Strategic, brilliant, dangerous. Everything her father had trained her to be before Orlov took it all away. I'll get you access, Adrian said. I have admin credentials to our financial systems. We can route through there. Lorenzo looked at his son. If we do this and it goes wrong, you'll go to prison. If we don't do this, Adrian countered, Orlov wins and more innocent people die. Father, for once in our lives, let's choose right over safe. Adrian's phone rang. Marcus from the Sable Room, voice frantic. Adrian Vescari, your assistant called, said Elena's in trouble. What's happening? Adrian put him on speaker. Marcus, Elena is Ariana Serravalle. She's been undercover gathering evidence against corruption in my father's company. The man who threatened her is the same man threatening to destroy Vescari Global. Silence. Then, that sweet girl, she's been fighting a war this whole time? Yes. And your daughter's treatment is paid for. All of it. Consider it an apology for putting Elena in danger. Ariana showered, changed into clothes Sofia provided, tailored pantsuit, slate gray, expensive enough to belong in that boardroom. She looked at herself in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. Not Elena Costa, not quite Ariana Serravalle. Someone in between, someone forged in fire. Adrian appeared behind her reflection. You look like a Serravalle. I hate that I'm nervous, Ariana admitted. 2 years of planning, and now that it's real, you're allowed to be afraid. You're walking into a room of people who would have stood by while your family died. Their eyes met in the mirror. If something happens to me, nothing will, Adrian interrupted, turning her to face him. I won't let it. Lorenzo pulled Ariana aside before they left. Before we do this, you deserve to know something. When your father died, I attended his funeral, in secret. I stood in the back of that Serravalle church and watched an 18-year-old girl refuse to cry, refuse to break. And I knew, his voice cracked, I knew something was wrong. I've spent 8 years trying to convince myself I was justified. But I saw your face that day, and I never quite believed it. You want forgiveness? Ariana asked coldly. I can't give it. But I don't want revenge anymore. I want justice. And for that, unfortunately, I need you. Lorenzo nodded. Then you'll have me. All of me. Whatever it costs. They descended to waiting cars. Adrian caught Ariana's hand, pulled her into his studio. He grabbed a small canvas from a drawer, maybe 6 by 8 inches, a painting of the Sable Room's back window, Elena's silhouette visible, looking out at the city. I painted this 6 months ago. I didn't know your name, but I knew something about you mattered. He pressed it into her hands. Survive today, Ariana, for both of us. As they walked to the cars, Ariana's phone buzzed. Text from unknown. 3rd floor emergency exit is your only way out if it goes bad. Trust only what you can see with your own eyes. M. She showed Adrian. Marco's feeding us intel. But how does he know Vescari Tower layout? Adrian's face went grim. Unless this whole thing is a trap bigger than we thought. The Vescari Tower lobby felt like walking into a cathedral built to worship money. 60-foot ceilings, Italian marble imported from Carrara quarries, abstract sculptures that cost more than most Americans earned in a lifetime. Camera flashes exploded like small arms fire as they entered. Press sharks smelling blood. reporters shouting questions that overlapped into white noise. Adrian kept a hand on Ariana's lower back, protective, claiming, announcing to every watching camera that she wasn't here as decoration, she was here as a player. The executive elevator rose 62 floors in silence. Ariana watched Manhattan shrink through the glass walls, the city becoming a game board of steel and concrete. Her reflection in this polished brass looked like a stranger, chin up, shoulders back. Serravalle pride in every line. Her father would have been proud, or horrified, maybe both. The boardroom doors were African mahogany, 20 feet tall, designed to make everyone who entered feel small. But when they swung open, revealing the theater of power beyond, Ariana didn't shrink. The room was designed for intimidation. 30-foot ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan like the city was a conquered territory. A table that seated 50 carved from a single piece of Brazilian walnut. 40 board members, already assembled. Their combined net worth probably exceeding most nations' GDP. Lawyers in matching suits? An SEC investigator Orlov had summoned, looking uncomfortable with the wealth on display. And at the head of the table, sitting in Lorenzo's chair like he'd already won, Mikail Orlov. He stood as they entered. 6'2", former FSB operative who'd traded Moscow winters for Manhattan summers but never lost that Soviet efficiency. His suit was Sable Room, his smile was a blade. "Lorenzo, Adrian, you're late." His eyes raked over Ariana with calculated dismissal. "And you've brought a guest. I'm afraid this is a closed meeting. Only board members and legal counsel." Lorenzo's voice cut like a chainsaw through silk. "This is Ariana Serravalle. She's here as a witness to fraud. Unless you'd prefer to explain to the SEC why you're blocking relevant testimony." Murmurs rippled around the table. Board members exchanged glances, some confused, some calculating, all wondering how this would affect their portfolios. Senator Richard Hayes, Vescari board member and Orlov's silent partner, spoke up. "The Serravalle family. I thought they were all dead or disgraced." Ariana stepped forward, and 40 pairs of eyes tracked her movement. "Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. I'm very much alive, and I'm here to present evidence that Mikail Orlov embezzled $2 billion from Vescari Global, framed my father to cover his tracks, and is currently executing a board coup to seize control of this company." The room erupted. Voices overlapped, shock, denial, questions shouted over each other. Orlov's face remained calm, but Ariana caught the micro-expression, a slight tightening around his eyes. Fear, quickly suppressed. "That's a serious accusation," Orlov said smoothly. "From a woman who's been working undercover, illegally, at a restaurant frequented by this board. How do we know she's not the threat?" Adrian moved to the presentation screen, connecting his laptop with movements practiced from 1,000 boardroom presentations. Financial records flooded the display. Shell companies, transaction routes through Cyprus and the Caymans, numbered accounts that led back to a single destination. "These records show systematic theft dating back to 2017, Adrian said. His voice carried the authority of a man born to lead. "The money flows through classic money laundering routes, and they all trace back to companies controlled by Mikail Orlov." Orlov didn't flinch. "Those accounts don't exist. Your evidence is fabricated." Then you won't mind," Ariana said, stepping beside Adrian. "If we demonstrate in real time that money is currently moving through these accounts?" Adrian's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing systems that required credentials he technically had but definitely shouldn't use like this. On the screen, transactions appeared. Millions moving from Vescari accounts into Orlov's shell companies. Timestamped 1:17 p.m., right now. "Those transfers are happening as we speak," Adrian said. "Orlov set them to auto-execute during this meeting, thinking we'd be distracted. But we're watching. Every dollar, every theft." The board watched in silence. Ariana could feel this power shifting, could see it in their faces, the calculations of rats abandoning a sinking ship. Orlov's smile didn't falter. "Impressive theater. But even if these accounts were mine, and I'm not admitting that, how do you prove I controlled them?" "Digital evidence can be manipulated." Lorenzo stood, and the room quieted. When the patriarch spoke, people listened. "Then let's discuss proof you can't manipulate. The murder of my wife, Elena Vescari, in 2012. Ruled accidental, but I reopened the case last night." Lorenzo's voice was steady, but Ariana heard the tremor underneath. Brake lines cut. Security footage from the garage, deleted by someone with administrative access. "Someone like you, Mikail?" Orlov's calm cracked, just slightly, a hairline fracture in marble. "You have no proof." "I have testimony," Lorenzo said. "The mechanic who serviced the car the week before. He's willing to testify that you approached him, asked detailed questions about the brake system. He thought it was routine security protocol. Now he knows better. Orlov stood, and his hand moved toward his jacket. Security around the room tensed, but he only pulled out his phone. "This is absurd. I'm calling—" "No one," Ariana interrupted. "Because your network is offline. Sophia?" Sophia Reyes's voice came through the boardroom speakers. She was outside with her team, monitoring everything. Orlov's mercenary teams have been neutralized. His communication network has been jammed. 15 members of his security staff just flipped, agreeing to testify in exchange for immunity. "It's over, Mikail." Orlov's face finally showed emotion, rage, pure and cold. He looked at Ariana like he wanted to peel her skin off slowly. "You think you've won? You're a Serravalle. Your family's name is poison. Even if I fall, you'll never be anything but the daughter of a disgraced suicide." Ariana walked toward him, fearless. Every board member leaned forward. "My father wasn't a suicide," she said quietly. "He was murdered, and you're going to confess." She produced a small recording device from her jacket. "Because I've been wearing a wire this whole time. Every threat you've made, every admission recorded, including the part where you just confirmed, details about my father's death that were never made public." Orlov's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing." Ariana pressed play. Orlov's voice from their phone call that morning. "She'll die like her father did, falling from a great height." The boardroom gasped collectively. Before Orlov could respond, the mahogany doors burst open. Marco Serravalle stood there, not in Italy, very much in New York, flanked by FBI agents wearing raid jackets. "He'll say everything," Marco announced, voice steady despite his youth. "Because I've been working with the FBI for 6 months. And I have recordings of Orlov ordering my sister's death, my parents' murders, and conspiring to commit securities fraud." He looked at Orlov with all the hate a 24-year-old who lost his childhood could muster. "Agent Morrison, he's all yours." The FBI agents moved with practiced efficiency, reading Orlov's rights while securing his hands in cuffs that clicked like coffin nails. The boardroom erupted into controlled chaos. Journalists who'd been waiting outside suddenly flooding in, board members shouting for their lawyers, stock tickers on side screens showing Vescari Global's price oscillating wildly between freefall and recovery. Ariana stood frozen, watching Marco. 8 years since she'd seen her brother. He'd been 16 then, a scared kid being shipped to relatives while she rebuilt herself as a ghost. Now he was 24, wearing an FBI consultant badge, standing taller than their father ever had. As agents led Orlov toward the door, he stopped, looked back at Ariana. "You know what's funny? I almost admired you. The patience, the planning. Almost." The feeling," Ariana said coldly, "was never mutual." Then he was gone, and the room spun. 2 years of weight, of carrying this mission alone, suddenly lifted, and without it, Ariana felt untethered. Gravity became negotiable. Her knees buckled. Adrian caught her before she hit marble floor. "I've got you." Behind them, Lorenzo was pounding the gavel, trying to restore order. "This board meeting is adjourned. Effective immediately, Mikail Orlov is terminated. All accounts frozen, criminal proceedings initiated." He looked at Adrian. "The company is yours, son. You've earned it." But Ariana barely heard. She was staring at Marco, and he was staring back, and the 8 years between them collapsed like a dying star. She ran, crashed into her brother's arms, and for the first time since she was 18, since she watched their father's body carried from the palazzo, since she held their mother's hand as grief consumed her, Ariana wept, loud, ugly, relieved. Adrian watched, his heart breaking and healing simultaneously. Sophia appeared at his elbow, face grim. "Sir, we have a problem." Adrian turned. "What now?" Orlov had a failsafe, Protocol Omega. If he's arrested, his remaining team executes final orders. Sophia pulled up security feeds on her tablet. 2 armed men heading for the server room on floor 40. If they destroy the physical servers, the financial evidence vanishes. We'd have copies, but admissibility in court requires the originals. She hesitated. "And there's a 3rd team heading for this floor, targeting the 3 of you specifically." Lorenzo's face hardened into the steel that built empires. "How many?" 6 men, armed, 3 minutes out. Adrian made a decision that would have been unthinkable 3 days ago. "Marco, get Ariana out. 3rd floor emergency exit. That text you sent was right. It's clear. Get her to safety." Ariana grabbed his arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "No, I'm not running anymore." You've done your part," Adrian said gently, cupping her face like she was something precious he'd just discovered. "Let me do mine, please." Marco pulled Ariana toward the door. "He's right. We have to go." Ariana resisted, every muscle fighting. Her eyes locked on Adrian's, 1,000 words in that look. None of them adequate. So she kissed him instead. Fast, desperate, real, tasting like salt and promises in futures that might not happen. Then Marco dragged her away. Lorenzo and Adrian hit the stairwell, sprinting down 22 flights. "You're too old for this," Adrian panted. "I'm too mean to die," Lorenzo shot back, but he was breathing hard, knees protesting every impact. They burst through the 40th floor stairwell door. The server room loomed ahead. Glass walls, rows of machines that held the evidence to convict Orlov. Two men in tactical gear were working to plant explosives, movements professional and unhurried. "Stop," Lorenzo shouted. One man turned, raised his weapon. Adrian moved on pure instinct, tackling his father aside as bullets shredded the air where Lorenzo's head had been. They scrambled behind a reception desk, oak veneer exploding in splinters. "We're pinned," Lorenzo gasped. Gunfire erupted from the opposite direction, Sophia and her team laying down covering fire. The two mercenaries found themselves in a crossfire, surrendered within seconds. Sophia secured them, checked the explosives. C4, set on a remote trigger. If we'd been 30 seconds later... She didn't finish the sentence. "Where's Ariana?" Adrian demanded. "Is she clear?" Sophia's face went white as she listened to her earpiece. "Marco has her in a service elevator, heading down. But..." She met Adrian's eyes. "There's a team waiting for them on the 3rd floor. Marco doesn't know." In the service elevator, Ariana's earpiece crackled. Sophia's panicked voice. "Marco, don't exit on 3. Hostiles in position." But the elevator was already slowing, mechanisms engaging. Marco put himself in front of Ariana. "When the door opens, run left. Fire exit is 20 feet. Don't stop. Marco, I'll be right behind you." The door slid open onto 4 armed men. Marco shoved Ariana out, tackling the nearest mercenary. Gunfire erupted, deafening in the confined space. Ariana screamed Marco's name, but hands grabbed her from behind. One of Sophia's team members. Pulling her toward the fire exit, she fought, trying to reach Marco, but they were dragging her to safety. The last thing she saw, Marco going down, blood blooming across his shoulder like a terrible flower. On floor 40, Adrian heard Sophia's report through his earpiece. "Marco's hit, not critical, but he's down." Ariana's secure, but hysterical. Adrian didn't hesitate. "I'm going to her." Lorenzo grabbed his arm. "Son, we need to secure these servers." "I love her," Adrian said. Simple, true. The first time he'd said it out loud to anyone but Ariana. "I love her, and she needs me. The servers can wait." Lorenzo looked at his son, really saw him, maybe for the first time, and released his grip. "Then go. I'll handle this." Adrian ran. Adrian took the executive elevator, screw stealth, speed mattered now, and found Ariana in a protected office on the ground floor surrounded by Sophia's team. She was pacing like a caged animal, tears streaming, Marco's blood staining her slate-gray suit. When Adrian entered, she whirled. "Marco is alive," Adrian said, crossing to her. "Shoulder wound. They're taking him to Presbyterian. Sophia's best medic is with him." Ariana collapsed against him, and Adrian held her like she was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid. "I almost lost him again. But you didn't. He's safe. You're safe." Adrian pressed his face into her hair. "It's over, Ariana. Orlov's arrested. The evidence is secure. You won." Lorenzo appeared in the doorway. Ariana tensed, but Lorenzo's expression was soft in a way she'd never imagined possible on that aristocratic face. "Marco's in the ambulance. I'm sending my personal surgeon to meet him at the hospital, the best in the city. He'll be fine." Ariana searched his face. "Why are you helping us?" "Because I owe your family more than I can repay. But watching my son love you, watching you love him back, despite everything, that's a start." Lorenzo's voice carried weight that had nothing to do with money. "The Vescari and Serravalle families have been enemies for 3 generations. Maybe it's time we became something else." 7 days later, the Sable Room gleamed under chandelier light, transformed from crime scene to celebration. Lorenzo's idea, a peace offering wrapped in Italian silk and expensive wine. The guest list was intimate. The Vescari family, Marco, arm in a sling but grinning, FBI agents who'd helped dismantle Orlov's network, Marcus, whose daughter was now in remission and glowing at a nearby table, Sophia's security team looking uncomfortable in formal wear. Ariana entered on Adrian's arm, wearing deep blue that made her look like Mediterranean royalty. She was no longer invisible. Every head turned. Conversations paused. The woman who'd served these same people water and appetizers now walked among them as an equal. Lorenzo stood, raising his glass. The room quieted instantly. Old money still recognized when the patriarch spoke. 8 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I trusted the wrong man, destroyed the wrong family, and nearly lost my son to my own arrogance. His voice carried across the room. I can't undo the past. Antonio and Juliana Serravalle deserve better, but I can honor them by doing right by their children. He looked at Ariana, and his eyes held genuine warmth. You were 18 when I destroyed your world. You could have destroyed mine in return. Instead, you chose justice, mercy, truth. You're a better person than I'll ever be. He switched to Calabrian dialect, the ancient tongue. Benvenuta nella famiglia, non come nemico ma come figlia. Welcome to the family, not as an enemy but as a daughter. Ariana stood, her own glass raised, throat tight with emotion she'd thought she'd buried forever. She responded in the same dialect, voice carrying clear and strong, Il fuoco che ha bruciato le nostre case, ora ci riscalda entrambi. The fire that burned our houses now warms us both. The table erupted in applause. Lorenzo's smile was genuine. The first real smile Adrian had seen on his father's face in years. Later, after dessert and speeches and Marco's dramatic retelling of his FBI cooperation, Adrian pulled Ariana onto the rooftop terrace. The same rooftop where she used to escape during smoke breaks, where she'd stood invisible while the gods feasted below. Now she stood here as herself, Manhattan glittering beneath them like scattered diamonds. Adrian's arms wrapped around her from behind. Do you remember the first time you saw me? 2 years ago. You ordered the branzino and barely touched it. You were on your phone, arguing with your father about a merger. You looked lonely. I remember noticing you 6 months in. Someone made a crude comment and you didn't react, but your knuckles went white on the picture. He turned her to face him. I started painting you without meaning to. Dozens of sketches. I told myself it was artistic interest, but I was lying. I was lonely, and you were the first real thing in my fake world. Ariana pulled the Serravalle signet ring from beneath her dress. She'd kept it on its chain, even after everything. My father gave me this as a weapon. Use it when you're strong enough, he said. She removed it from the chain, held it in her palm. Adrian produced the Vescari ring, platinum, his family crest catching moonlight. Our fathers wielded these as symbols of power, Adrian said. We could do the same, continue the legacy of competition. Or we create something new. He took her left hand, slipped the Serravalle ring onto her right ring finger. She took his Vescari ring, placed it beside her family ring. 2 symbols side by side. Not merged, Ariana said softly. Still separate, but together. I can't promise easy, Adrian said. The press will scrutinize us. The financial world will gossip. I don't want easy, Ariana countered. I want real. And this, she lifted their joined hands, rings catching light. This is the most real thing I've ever felt. Adrian kissed her, and below them Manhattan hummed with endless possibility. The city that almost killed them now witnessed their beginning. Tomorrow, a paparazzi photo would run in every outlet. Vescari heir and Serravalle heiress, a love that united empires. But tonight, they were just 2 people who survived the impossible and found that the greatest treasure wasn't revenge or redemption, it was each other. They say a billionaire's heart is made of steel, cold, calculating, and capable of warmth. But Adrian Vescari learned the truth that most powerful men never discover. The strongest hearts are the ones that let the fire in. Elena Costa taught him that invisible doesn't mean powerless, that service workers carry more dignity than boardrooms full of suits, that real wealth isn't counted in stock portfolios but in souls willing to see you truly. She showed him that the most valuable currency, in a world built on transactions, is the courage to choose truth over comfort, justice over convenience, love over legacy. In the towers of Manhattan, where money rules everything, 2 people from enemy families chose each other over empires. They became each other's truth in a world built on lies, each other's fire in a city made of ice. And that is the billionaire heart, not one that counts, but one that connects, not one that conquers, but one that dares to be vulnerable enough to love. The greatest fortune isn't inherited, it's chosen. And sometimes, the person who saves you is the one you were taught to see as an enemy. What would you risk for truth? And who would you become if you stopped being invisible? Disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes. All characters, events, companies, and locations are purely fictional or used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, businesses, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. The narrative depicts dramatic scenarios involving corporate fraud, family conflict, and romance that are products of creative imagination. This content is not intended as financial, legal, or relationship advice. Viewer discretion is advised for themes involving loss, grief, and violence.